Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for your time today. So, as you've heard, my name is Dr. Paul Gavin. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Avecho Biotechnology. We're a Melbourne-based company with a novel formulation technology called TPM. Now, our background is pharmaceutical drug development for traditional non-cannabis medicines, but the expertise that we have developed over the last 20 years is directly applicable to a whole range of shortcomings that affect the broad global cannabis industry. So today I'm going to talk to you about our pharmaceutical TPM enhanced cannabidiol or CBD capsule that we've been developing over the last couple of years. It's heading into our pivotal phase 3 clinical trial in Australia this year. And we're positioning ourselves to exploit the lucrative global cannabis markets using this and other TPM enhanced products. So next slide, please. And there's our safe harbor statement. Yep. So look, before I get into the product itself, I just wanted to highlight why cannabinoids are such a good fit for Avecho. So cannabinoids are the molecules in cannabis. Many countries around the world have enacted some sort of legislation to make them legal to be prescribed for medicinal purposes. Other countries around the world have already enacted legislation for consumer and recreational markets. But because it's been illegal for so long, is the normal R&D that you would normally conduct onto formulation development and clinical trials and all the rest, it just doesn't exist. And so the formulations that are currently available to patients are very crude, simple oil formulations for the most part, or even flour. And so we all know that moving forward as the industry matures, a range of more acceptable sort of pharmaceutical dosage forms are going to be required to fulfill the needs of patients, physicians, and consumers. Next slide, please. However, the cannabinoids themselves suffer from a range of technical issues that make them very difficult to formulate, essentially. So they are oil-soluble molecules with poor solubility in water. And like most other oil-soluble molecules, they have very, very poor oral bioavailability. So what that means is whatever you eat, cannabis products that you eat, you only absorb sort of 3 to 8% of the cannabinoid molecules, and all the rest is metabolized and excreted and has no value. So this presents real challenges for developing formulations that can deliver cannabinoids to the body efficiently. So look, if you can increase the absorption, which we call bioavailability, you can potentially have a product that has greater therapeutic effect. You can look at new clinical indications that have previously been unreachable because they needed really high doses. You can reduce the amount that a patient needs to take for a cost saving. And where we come in is really commercial differentiation, because all around the world already, cannabis is simply a commodity. There's no differentiation. It's a race to the bottom with price, and there's very little differentiation that's a real commercial advantage. Next slide, please. And so the differentiation is really where we come in. So as I said, we've got a proprietary technology called TPM. Now, when you add TPM to systems that contain water, it self-assembles into tiny little nanoparticles, less than the width of a human hair, and these nanoparticles can encapsulate and solubilize drug. And this works particularly well with oil-soluble molecules that have poor solubility in water, like the cannabinoids. That's essentially what you can see in this picture here. So the vial on the right is CBD in a vial of mostly water. And you can see it's undissolved. It sits there as a solid aggregate. You can't do anything with that as a product. The vial on the left is exactly the same formulation with a little bit of our TPM added. Nanoparticles form, they encapsulate the drug, and they make an evenly soluble product that you can use for a variety of dosage forms. And so when we see this kind of profile, this with and without TPM comparison, the last 20 years of experience tell us that we can develop products that have increased oral absorption or increased topical and transdermal absorption for products that you would apply to the skin. And when we saw this kind of profile that you can see in this image, we really decided that it's up to us to start developing pharmaceutical dosage forms of CBD, because that's a real gap in the global medicinal cannabis market. Next slide, please. So the first thing is we started to optimize a formulation for absorption. And so this was a process that started in Australia and then went to Denmark and then went to the US. And essentially what you're looking at in these two graphs here is increased absorption of CBD in two different animal models, a rat and a dog, when given without TPM compared to standard dosage forms. So the graph on the left is rats. The tiny, tiny little red bar that you can see on the left is a product which is just CBD dissolved in a carrier oil called MCT. That's how it's prescribed to patients currently around Australia and most of the world, you can see it's got really, really poor absorption. Now, the graph, the TPM 1, 2, and 3 to the right of that, they're all different TPM formulations. The one on the right led to an increase in CBD absorption of about 40 times compared to that. So that was pretty exciting. The graph on the right is the same formulations in dogs. This has an additional additive, which is a product called Epidiolex. So Epidiolex is currently the only FDA-approved CBD product on the planet. So it was developed by GW Pharma. It's for a couple of rare orphan indications around childhood epilepsy. So it's not prescribed to that many patients, but it's the only approved product on the planet. And despite the orphan indications, that company, GW Pharma, was acquired a year and a half ago by Jazz for $7.2 billion US. So that's how valuable a registered pharmaceutical cannabinoid product could be. So as you can see on the graph on the right, again, MCT delivers very poorly. Epidiolex delivers very poorly. Our formulation, which is in the clinical trials, has about a 400% increase compared to Epidiolex in dog models. Next slide, please. And so this is a summary slide of what we've done really over the last 3 years. We've run very, very fast on these pharmaceutical products. We saw a gap. The last 20 years of biotech experience allowed us to run this fast. And so we've essentially completed the formulation development. As you've seen, we've proven in 2 different animal models, we've got this increased absorption. We took this product and engaged Catalent in the US, and they turned it into a pharmaceutical soft gel capsule, which they finished in May of 21. It contains 75 milligrams of ultra pure synthetic CBD. So we know all the regulatory agencies around the world prefer synthetic drugs to natural botanical extract because they're high purity, they're very reproducible. The regulatory agencies far prefer them. The product is on ongoing stability, but it looks really good so far. So the first batches have passed a year and a half. We only need to hit 2 years, and it's a stable product, and it looks fantastic so far. We've completed the early human trials in Australia, phase 1 PK studies, which are an important part of a product label and a TGA and FDA submission. And the big ticket item is we just before Christmas got ethics approval for our pivotal phase 3 clinical trial, which will be conducted in Australia in a sleep-related indication this year. Now, the product is initially seeking approval with the Australian TGA, which is unheard of. As a biotech, we would never proactively ordinarily develop a product first for Australia. You always go for the US, but there's a very unique opportunity with Australia right now with the TGA, and they're incentivizing people to do clinical trials to register CBD, because if you are successful, CBD can be registered as an over-the-counter medicine, which essentially means you can walk into any pharmacy in the country and buy CBD direct from the chemist instead of going to a GP and getting a prescription and all the rest. So you've got direct access to 26 million people. The difficulty is who knows how to do clinical trials and develop product. And so really there's only a handful of us left in this race for registration. Now our products, anything with TPM has patent protection, but this specific product, we've filed 2 additional patents. They're in PCT stage. They'll go into grant starting sort of middle of this year. Next slide, please. And so I guess why sleep? There are couple of things we could have started with. We started with sleep essentially because of this OTC indication opportunity. But 40% of Australians aren't sleeping. 60% of us are experiencing poor sleep 3 to 4 times a week. Only 20% of us are sleeping uninterrupted. Essentially, the entire country is a potential customer. We're spending $250 million a year in Australia alone on existing medications with unwanted side effects, and it costs the Australian economy about $19 billion a year. Now, we spoke to the TGA. The TGA confirmed that insomnia was an appropriate indication for this over-the-counter opportunity. And so it's been all systems go. It's taken us a long time to design this study, really most of last year, because we are adamant that this trial has to be designed appropriately. So it's of value not just for Australia, but also the US and Europe. Next slide, please. And so what does the immediate development program look like? So as I say, we've got 3 years of work on it, ticking off a lot of the goalposts along the way. There are 3 main pillars remaining. The first is around the manufacturing. So we've now got 3 manufacturers overseas that can manufacture the product. We're about to put what's called the registration batches down. They are the ones that go into your formal TGA and FDA submission. So that'll be hopefully this quarter, and that'll start the clock ticking there. And we'll spend the rest of this year building the CMC dossier for a subsequent TGA registration. And then the big ticket item is this phase 3 trial. So as I say, the study design's finalized. We've engaged everyone that's going to be on the study. We know everyone who's involved. It's all ready to go. We got ethics approval just before Christmas, and we're just scheduling now the timing of that study. But we think clinical supply will be available sort of by the end of Q1, and hopefully we commence dosing in Q2. But it's a phase 3 clinical trial, and that's what biotech works towards, because it's a huge inflection point. Because if you get success there, then you can kind of write your own ticket, especially as we've seen for a pharmaceutical CBD product. Next slide, please. And so I mentioned at the start, maximizing value and sort of how do we intend to do that? So as I say, all our resources are really going into this phase 3 clinical trial. But CBD around the world is being prescribed for everything right now. It won't work for everything. Let me make that clear. We'll all start to discover the indications it doesn't work for. But while we focus on sleep, there's opportunity to license the capsule to other companies for other indications that we don't have the bandwidth or the resources to chase ourselves. We can also license it into different markets. So not just pharma, but, you know, consumer and medicinal and even recreational, and also subdivided by territory. So the global cannabis market at the moment is about $20 billion. $20 billion, despite the fact that it's crude dosage forms, there's no differentiation. It's essentially a commodity. So there's a lot of opportunity to do well in this space. And so really, I guess our company used to be in the business of developing entire pipelines and products, but now we have really a single product that can become an entire pipeline. Next slide, please. And so the strategy is already working. So we've already licensed the capsule for arthritis to a US pharmaceutical company. So we're hoping they submit to the FDA their IND, hopefully this quarter, and they'll pay for all the development in arthritis. And if they fail on their money. If they succeed, then we get, you know, royalties and cuts of an indication that we didn't have the bandwidth to chase ourselves. So that's particularly exciting. We've put our first toe in the water into the recreational cannabis space. We don't intend to do that directly ourselves. We're sticking true to biotech, but we're very comfortable to license our technology and our products to other people in recreational cannabis in the US so that they can derive value and, again, pay us for the TPM and the royalties and all the rest. And so that's looking quite good. There's a lot of interest overseas at the moment. Next slide, please. But recently, I guess, we announced a couple of things on our non-cannabis side. So again, I mean, we've been 20 years of biotech and pharmaceutical development, and we're bringing in that expertise to cannabis. It's not that we've sprung up out of medicinal cannabis in the last 5 minutes. This is what we do for a living. And so just before Christmas, we announced a licensing deal with Perrigo in the US. Perrigo are a large US or global consumer packaged goods company, and they licensed one of our enhanced topical products. So ibuprofen, they'll pay for all the clinical development for a US registration. And if it's successful and registered in the US, we'll get royalties, milestones, and all the rest. And we've just taken with another partner, Athenex, a separate product, which you can see in the picture, vitamin K, that's gone to the FDA in a pre-IND. So they're essentially petitioning the FDA that, you know, this TPM enhanced vitamin K product can replace a lot of the nasties associated with vitamin K that's currently on the US. And so we're hoping that's just a first injectable, and there are a whole lot of FDA injectables using TPM that are available with partners for subsequent development. Next slide, please. So last couple of slides. This is just a quick company snapshot as at the end of Q3. You know, we had just over $2 million in the bank. As you heard at the start, the market cap's about, you know, 30 million, give or take any given day. The top 20 shareholders have about 40% of the company. I mean, you obviously hear it from everyone, but, you know, we think obviously we're undervalued. But I mean, I just put it to you that obviously a company going to phase 3 clinical trials, and especially if we're successful with our phase 3 clinical trial, we're expecting a lot of interest, not just locally, but overseas from big pharma who are watching the space with great care to see who's successful in the pharmaceutical cannabinoid front. Last slide, please. Next one. And so, yeah, these are the real main value drivers over the next year. A phase 3 clinical program. As I mentioned, that's the big ticket item in biotech. It's the big inflection point, getting to a phase 3 trial and trying to get that across the line. We've got a proprietary, differentiated, patent protected formulation. We are best placed to actually get success in phase 3 and subsequent registration. We'll be updating the market about our manufacturing, because as we're successful there, we can start taking that product off and getting into the consumer markets as quickly as we can. We didn't touch upon, we did last year a couple of additional dosage forms. So topical transdermal CBD, we took into a phase 2 osteoarthritis study, and that actually worked really well for a small study. And we've got a lot of discussions underway with that product, and we'll be doing further clinical trials on the topicals this year. We hope to see, pretty comfortable that there'll be further partnering and licensing opportunities across new markets, new territories, and new indications. And what we've done as well in the last year is we have all these CBD dosage forms, but we took CBD out of all of them. We replaced them with THC and CBC and CBN and all the other cannabinoids, and they're all down on stability and undergoing assessment now. So we've multiplied the number of products available for licensing opportunities over the coming year. And just the last point is not to forget our pharmaceutical pedigree. So a couple of agreements in the last month with Perrigo and Athenex. There's further interest around further products, which we hope to consolidate over the next couple of months. And so before we know it, we're going to have a whole range of products in a whole range of clinical development programs, most of which will be paid for by other people. So yeah, thank you very much for your time. And yeah, happy to open the floor to questions.
Thanks, Paul. We do have quite a few questions. I am a CBD oil user myself. I find it fantastic to help me sleep. Just in regards to now, the CAM group announced this week that their CBD product failed for sleep in phase 3 trial. How is your product or trial design different such that it would expect to succeed?
Yeah, look, we did know that. That did come out yesterday. That really was a shame for the entire industry. None of us actually want to see our peers in the space fail, but we are very different to CAN. So CAN are a medicinal cannabis company. CAN's legacy skill is growing, cannabis and extracting cannabis and all the rest. We are biotech and formulation development and clinical trials. That's 20 years of what we've been doing. So while I can't specifically comment on the different absorptions between our two products, we know ours has significant increase in absorption, but we haven't actually played with those. But we do know our trials are very, very, very different. So the thing about CBD and all these cannabinoids to realize is that Australia, we are all pioneers in this space. So because of what's happened with the TGA and this opportunity for over-the-counter registration, there are placebo-controlled phase 3 trials happening in Australia at greater concentration for these indications than anywhere else in the world. So everyone's watching, and we're all kind of pioneers. But our study itself is much larger than any of the others. So if you don't know what effect size you'll see, or you suspect it'll be a small effect size, you need lots of patients. So we are going to dose over double the patients that CAN dosed in their trial to maximize the chance of seeing anything. We have a much tighter inclusion criteria. So CAN's patients and some of the others are really kind of mild in severity. We've got much tighter inclusion criteria around our patients, so we get much clearer, reproducible signals in the data. We're controlling to a degree for the placebo effect. So the placebo effect is what will kill these studies. I think I did an interview a couple of months ago with Cannabis. So they're all subjective endpoints. And if you don't know how to control for the placebo effect, it'll kill you when you come to your analysis. And irrespective of all those things, we're doing a higher dose than CAN. So CAN only went to 100 milligrams of CBD in their trial. We're going up to the full 150. So that's even before you account for an increase in absorption. So we've tried to make this study as bulletproof as we can. Does it mean that we are guaranteed to succeed? Of course it doesn't. But if CBD does anything for sleep, we will capture it in the clinical trial design that we've put together.
And Paul, just finally, we've probably run out of time. Can you give us an idea, and you mentioned partnership, can you give us an idea of your funding requirements over the next 12 months?
Sure. So we've got enough money in the bank to kick off and commence the phase 3 clinical trial. We don't have enough money in the bank to complete the phase 3 clinical trial, but we're taking care of that now. We've got a couple of additional licensing agreements that we are looking to consolidate over the next period of time, and that will determine how much additional capital comes in to start running the phase 3 trial. But in the event that they look good, then we won't need any additional capital. In the event they don't bring in the entirety of the required capital, then we'll obviously get it from other sources. But obviously, this phase 3 clinical trial is we will not skimp and look to underfund this and cut any corners, especially as a result of what happened with CAN yesterday. So we will be making sure that we have all the capital required to drive this to its full rigor.
Dr. Paul, Gavin, thanks for your time. We'll get you back later in the year. Good luck for 2023.
No worries. Thank you.